So I learned what comebackers were again really quickly, and then every covering first, all of it. 3 weeks of the best diet I never want to be on again. 30 pounds lighter. They sent me to meet the AA team on the road. And when I walked into the clubhouse in Zebulon, North Carolina to meet the Orlando Rays, the first kid that turned around looked at me, he goes, "Hey, we got a new coach." And I said, "I don't like you." Throw the first night, come in with a guy on first. Carcel, you'll love this. What do you think the first thing is I did with a guy on first before I ever threw a pitch? That you teach
I would.
never ever to do. I walked into second.
Oh,
And so I stopped and I'm giggling on the mound. And they're like, "You just gave up a guy into scoring position. Why are you giggling?" Catcher runs out. He goes, "What are you laughing at?" And I go, "I teach this." Ray Searage is our pitching coach. Bill Russell's our manager. They come out and are like, "What are you laughing about? This is kind of weird." I'm like, "I teach people not to do this. And that's what I did before I ever threw a pitch." And so they start giggling. The umpire comes out. He giggles too. Everybody goes back. I pick off the guy at second. I strike out the guy 91, 92. They're like, "Hey, he's not crazy. He's pretty good for an old guy." Second night in double A, 2 innings, strike out five guys, 98, 99. Next time in triple A. So 3 months after the bet, I try out. 3 months after the tryout, I'm in the big leagues. Earlier in my life, when I was supposed to be young and talented, I never got out of A ball. I was my own worst enemy. And talk about not doing things right. And I thought everything was owed to me at that point. And now at 35, I'm living where I shouldn't be living right now. I'm getting to have fun. I'm getting to be a kid again. And my athletic director in Fort Worth said, "Go be a kid this summer. And when you get done, come home. You're the safeties and backfield coach. And then you're the baseball coach. We got your job open for you." I said, "Yes, sir." The next time that athletic director saw me was pitching at the ballpark in Arlington. And he goes, "I guess you made the right decision." I go, "I didn't make the decision. The kids made the decision. I just followed through with what I told them I would do." And what a journey to get to be to that point in my life when you should not be there anymore. At 21, I'd have taken the game for granted, but at 35, I knew my time was limited and I want to do everything I could and enjoy being at a ballpark, walking around the ballpark, being there after the game, talking to big league players, learning how to coach kids better because of them. I'm not thinking, "Hey, we're going to write a book, and hey, we're going to have a movie, and hey, we're going to." There was none of this. This was, I'm a baseball player now. I'm not trapped in a classroom with 30 kids who are talking trash to me. I'm trapped in a stadium in New York where 30,000 people are talking trash to me. And this is pretty fun because they're coming up with stuff that I've never heard of before. I'm like, I'm going to keep that. And it
mm.
was just a lot of fun because the first night I go in New York, I'm getting up to warm up and I reach into the ball bag. And I'm the rookie, so I'm in charge of the candy bag too in the bullpen. "You're 35. We get that. We're sorry. Here's your bag." Okay. As I'm reaching into the bag, this big cop up above us in the bullpen goes, "Hey, Morris." Turn around. They're like, "Yeah." I said, "This is not balls. This is candy. I'm getting a piece of gum." He goes, "No, I got a ball." He unbuttons some of his buttons. They got that sharp uniform on they wear in New York. Pulls a ball out and he goes, "Sign this for my kid." That was cool to me. And then we go to New York, and for 3 days, I stay in left field during batting practice because I do not want to get screamed at by the bleacher creatures. On the fourth day, Bert calls me out to right field and he goes, "It's your turn, rookie." I'm like, "Great." And they start yelling, "Morris, Morris." And he goes, "If you don't turn around and acknowledge them, they're going to keep doing it." I turned around and he said, "You suck. It's a great story, but you suck anyway." And Bert looks at me and he goes, "That's all you get? Go back to right field." So it was just awesome being a part of that. And I remember watching Hank Aaron play with the Milwaukee Braves against the Red Sox when I was 10 years old, and our all-star team was at Fenway. Come back and be able to pitch in Boston and see the game from that viewpoint. Instead of looking down at the field, I'm looking up in the stands where I sat as a 10-year-old. Priceless. all because of a group of kids who saw something in me that everybody said, including doctors, said was gone. You can't do it. Won't happen. Why did you come back throwing that hard? No clue. 98 to 102. I have no idea. I mean, I have an idea, but a lot of people don't want to hear it. Let's put it that way. And God sometimes has things that he has a better plan than we have. My job was go to the next stop, work with more kids in a bigger environment. His job was, we're not done teaching these kids yet. And then we're going to teach more kids, and we're going to teach adults how to dream too. I think that was a big part of the driving force with me staying and doing what I did. And I met great people, man. You hear stories. Everybody hears the stories, right? You hear the negative stuff the media wants you to hear, but you actually meet the guys in the clubhouse and hang out with them, and you find out it's totally different than that. They just need something that they can talk about. And the first person to come up to me when I walked in the clubhouse the first time was Wade Boggs. Just gotten his 3,000 hit a few weeks before. He walks up and they've heard about the crazy science teacher for 3 months. He goes, that is the best story I've ever heard. Well, to me, I'm still a coach and a fan. I'm like, you're Wade Boggs. You like chicken. Stupid things that come out of your mouth. And he giggles at me, walks off. And then Jose Canseco, Fred McGriff. And I will say this about Fred. One of the sweetest swings I've ever seen, but more than that, one of the best fathers I've ever seen. And that to me is more important than being a ball player.
And that's where I wanted
Powerful
to.
story.
Thank you.
And my book is completely beat up, by the way. It went everywhere with me as I couldn't put it down. So literally every second I got a moment, I wanted to read it. And I got to tell people, get onto Dream Makers here. Fantastic book, very motivational. Made me think, of when we named this docuseries, this baseball docuseries, and I wanted to call it the Steve Karsay story. Steve's like, no. We're going to call it The Chosen Journey, because this is about my story, but it's also about everybody else's stories. How did people get to where they are? And Steve, if there's anybody who's lived many lives and journeys, it's Jim Morris. And when I went through this book, Jim, a couple items came to my head. Was number one, hearing your story made me reflect on my story, and it motivated me of what my life was and how I may have fallen down and what did I do to get up. And I found that very motivational. And that's one thing I would tell a lot of the readers is, watching you and hearing your stories, but when you read it and you really read the words of it, it really sinks home of this is much about inspiring others. It is about telling your tale, so to speak. And then from there, I really, you connect with the author, it connect with you and where you're going about in your life and where you came from. And then I feel like there's questions that come up, and I'm sure the readers, all the time raise things to you. And there are a couple items I thought that I read about the early part. You're talking about your story here, and I have to ask you on behalf of the listeners. First and foremost, you mentioned about being drafted by the Brewers, but that wasn't the first time you were drafted. You were drafted by the Yankees the year before.
Yeah.
And very different, I think, back in the 80s to where we are now in the year 2023 as far as how drafting goes and everything else. But when you get drafted in a late round, the chances of actually ever signing or going on with the team was very minuscule back then, correct?
Oh, here's a plane ticket, and let's go see what you can do. And you get a letter from George Steinbrenner, and you're like, hey, that's pretty cool. But at the same time, my grandfather was battling ALS or Lou Gehrig's disease, and I wanted to be home for not only him, but my grandmother, because at 6'3", he's a big man. At 5'3", my grandmother, not so much. And so I went to Ranger Junior College, and I turned down the Yankee offer because I needed to be closer to home.
That Yankee offer, though, that's one thing I was trying to get into the mindset of it, because you're eating, breathing, and sleeping baseball at this point. This is all you want to do with your life. This is all you spent your whole childhood to teen years doing, essentially. I mean, you touched upon there about Hank Aaron. You love baseball so much. When your friends run out of baseballs, you run home, grab the baseball autographed by Hank Aaron, and you're gonna play with it and destroy the ball because you don't care, because you just want to get some practice in. Do you have the capacity at that age to even evaluate how realistic the Yankee offer even is? Like, do I really think I'm gonna make it at this point? Like, if not for your grandfather, you take that opportunity, you think in a heartbeat?
Oh yeah, my father had retired from the military and moved back to Brownwood. If my grandfather would have already passed away, I'm gone, man. And but that wasn't the cards that were laid out in front of me at the time. And like I said, there are a lot of things that are a lot bigger than the sport, no matter how much we love it. And my grandparents were bigger than the sport. And for a person who, I'll tell you how I got drafted um, by the Brewers. We're at Ranger Junior College. Jack Allen's our coach. Everybody knew him. He coached everywhere he won. And he goes, I don't want you throwing the ball over 80 today. Sure, coach, whatever you want me to do. And all the third guy up hits one about 19 miles. And I'm like, I'm not doing that.
Mm.
And the next one I unload, and all of a sudden guns come out of cases everywhere. And there's like 19 scouts in the stands. He calls timeout. He walks out and he goes, oh, you just screwed me. And he turned around and walked off. That's all he said. And then I get drafted a few months later. And, Ellis Sparks is on our team. We have fantastic junior college team. And by then, my grandfather, he passed away in those few months between the scouts being there and the Brewers drafting me in January. And so once he was in the ground and I found out my grandmother was going to be okay and they drafted me, I'm like, I'll take it. Now, here's where immaturity comes in back in the time. They gave me $35,000 to go chase my dream, and I thought, I'm rich. And for 9 months, I was. And my grandparents instilled a lot of faith in me. And so faith is a part of my life. And I know this, God has a sense of humor, man. At 19, when I got drafted, my dad said, do not take that money and go buy a little red sports car. So I bought it. And then I drive to spring training. I go from Brownwood to Phoenix, where the Brewers were for spring training. I drive through Big Lake, Texas, and I go, who would live here? And God remembered that, because 15 years later, that's where I was. I'm like, oh. And ironically, my catcher, Joel De La Garza, comes into my classroom one of the first days I'm there, and he goes, Coach, we don't know why you took this job. People come through here on their way to somewhere else. And that immediately took me back to 15 years. And I thought, things can be misrepresented under the guise of being good for you. Little did I know that was going to be the place where I needed to be at that time.
And thinking to where you came to the point as the rookie, as a 35-year-old, and given everything you had, health issues and arm issues, how is it, you touched upon a little bit, I know, and it's something, that non-believers will have a hard time, fathoming, but how is it physically, humanly possible for your arm to do that later in life? It's obscene, literally. Like, I would picture the way you described it in the book of your arm, I picture like it's hanging by a thread at this point, and then you're going to throw 94 and 98. That doesn't seem right to me.
Doesn't seem right to me either. And any kid I've ever taught, that doesn't happen. Especially for a 35-year-old overweight dude who makes a bet with a group of high school kids. How is that even possible? And you're right, I can't explain it. And even Dr. Job, when I signed with the Dodgers and they bring me into camp, he was the person who sold the Dodgers on me and said, this guy's in fantastic shape. We've tested everything. And he looks at me, he goes, if you can figure out why you throw as hard as you do, tell me so I can get rich. I looked at Frank Joe and I went, you are rich. He goes, richer. And just, I loved him. And he took care of people. But he didn't have an explanation either. And he goes, it is what it is. And they hooked me up to their gizmos. They had me throw in front of the x-ray thing. You can't throw that hard. You physically can't do that. And yet you are. So even it confounds the medical community too. So that's why I think it's bigger than the medical field.